normally we would go into the intro, kind of do things our typical way, but Sam is patiently waiting in the studio. So we're going to get Sam in and we're going to talk about Caleb Porter. Sam, what's up, buddy?
What's up? First off, don't blame it on the fly. You can blame it on me. I apologize. I thought I would be home from my church group before 9 o'clock, so it's perfectly on me. But when it comes to the firing of Caleb Porter, it doesn't matter if I'm in a car, it doesn't matter if I'm out in the forest. I need to
Hey,
get the opinions off. So I appreciate you bearing with me and blame any issues that you have on me tonight.
Yeah, this is why I wore this shirt. This guy needs a beer. I knew it was going to be a rough one tonight. So I'm taking beer donations if anybody wants to send some my way.
right.
I guess to kick it off, Sam, if you can just give everybody the full overview of New England as it has stood in 2025 and kind of maybe what led up to what happened today.
Yeah, I mean, really, this team, and I think you can even date it back to when Caleb Porter first came in, almost primed to make a run, coming off the heels of around 2022, 2023, when things were looking to start up, and then obviously the whole Bruce Arena thing happens. But we don't have to get into that. But really, I think when Caleb Porter came in, the expectation was that this team would continue to compete, continue to potentially win trophies, be active in the playoff contention. And then what ended up happening is you got an extremely streaky team. This team, I would say, is defined by the streaks it went on, whether it be some unbeaten runs and more recently some, times where they were seemingly unable to score goals or win games. So it seemed like it was getting to a breaking point in 2025. Caleb Porter was on the hot seat as soon as the Revolution just could not score any more goals. And I think personally, I probably would have done this after the Montreal loss, but I think fans are somewhat relieved that it actually has happened and he has been fired.
Yeah, and just going back to 2024, Sam, just quickly, of course, the Revs were in Champions League after the season that they had in 2023, finished in the quarterfinals. So I feel like that year you had kind of a mulligan to attribute to the Revs' slow start in 2024. But as he kind of alluded to, the bottom just fell out in 2025. Porter was, I feel like combative with the press at times. I felt like he could really feel the walls closing in on him. And, he was just always on borrowed time in 2025. And I guess what's the sentiment around fans? I mean, it feels like, I agree, it could have happened early in the year, but is there relief or is there like uncertainty around the Reds fan base at this time?
Yeah, I mean, when you talk about Caleb Porter being combative with the press, obviously, reminds me of back in 2024 when I asked about Dave Romney, what he would have to do in the starting 11, and I got told to basically ask the question that he thought I was asking him, and ended up being quite combative. So, that wasn't the only moment. There was recently a moment with of the.com. He after mind you about how he essentially said that the 2021 team wasn't actually that good. They didn't play the best soccer, and that kind of prompted a follow. And it was that where I'm like, oh, and now, at it, I think again, there's lots of relief for fans. I think they're happy it happened, and you getting some news tonight with coaching candidates. I think there's some hope for what the future will look like.
Yeah, and just quickly, sorry, Henry. I just want to call this out too. I feel like when you look at the number of Revs players that went over to San Jose to reunite with Bruce Arena before this season, that kind of told the story about the kind of relationship they had with Caleb Porter, I feel like.
Yeah, definitely. I think, like I mentioned, Dave Romney being one of those, Ian Hart, a midfielder who performed quite well, and, seeing to San Jose tells that story. I think Bruce Arena is probably a manager when it comes to Caleb Porter. I think he has his quote unquote guys, but largely, I think it was interesting to see his man management. I think if you look at his time with the Revs, it's kind of marked by interesting or maybe just poor selection, player selection. You know, you had someone like Luca Langoni, the most expensive transfer, I believe, up to recently with the Dor Turgman acquisition. Luca Langoni was the most expensive acquisition in Revs history, and he was forced into a bench role due to a formation change that Caleb Porter had. And, you know, seeing the quote unquote Caleb Porter guys, and when you look at the changes the roster had in 2025, you expected it to be a lot better. But as Revs fans found out, this team just wasn't able to get over the hump, especially with Caleb Porter. It seemed like strikers really underperformed. So again, I think it's a lot of relief for Revs fans. And I think, you know, like you said, looking at the players who have gone on and been able to do some good things, I think it's more a testament to what they've been able to done than necessarily what happened in New England.
Sam, you've already kind of started digging into that question a little bit, but you know, talking about the selection and some of those issues, but what are some of the other reasons he didn't work out? I mean, when you look at it on paper, a guy who's won MLS Cup twice, you would think would be able to come into that team and be able to set it up for success. Just what are some of the other reasons he just didn't work out?
Yeah, I think, you know, part of it, you know, like your commenters are kind of noting, I really wonder if the game is necessarily kind of gone by him. I know it's difficult to maybe say of a head coach compared to a player, but, you know, it was interesting just to see how much he's relying on the midfield play. And I think Carlos Gil has done a fantastic job throughout this. I mean, without Carlos Gil, I think this team would be absolutely in the doldrums. But I think just maybe how he interacts in the media, how he talks about some players, his view of younger players, and I think also too, just like you mentioned, and we've been talking about, the man selection has really been difficult. And you know, really, what's marked me is there's been some times, and you know, Caleb will be quick to mention that he does take some blame, but there's been plenty of times where he's kind of shielded the blame as well. And I think overall, that can create not the best atmosphere for players. And I think, you know, especially I remember kind of on the waning days of Bruce Arena heading into Caleb Porter, you know, the locker room, it didn't have the music jumping, it didn't have the same exact vibes. And, you know, when they're on the winning streaks, things are great. But it really seemed like it was getting to a breaking point, like I alluded to, and things were just going so south. And so I think it's really a multitude of things. And, you know, thinking about his future, I don't exactly know. This could be it for the Caleb Porter trainer. Obviously, MLS hires a lot of guys who have been in the system, but I really wonder if he'll get another head coaching job, you know, specifically in MLS.
So I guess, and that kind of answered the question that Omar had about, you know, is a good coach just unlucky? And I kind of get the vibe too, just kind of seeing how things have gone with him over the past few years. It just kind of feels like maybe that lightning in a bottle has kind of disappeared a little bit. The game has changed. Major League Soccer's changed. But for New England specifically, now it's, I mean, you guys get to turn the page. You get to look forward to whoever it may be. And as of a couple hours ago, Tom Bogert is reporting that there are talks, at least preliminary talks, with none other than our good friend Jim Curtin. What do you think Jim would be the proper fit for kind of the personnel and everything else, the culture that New England has?
I think it's interesting. I think, you know, when you hear Jim Curtin, you're like, back to bring Sharks up. I mean, that man is an MLS genius. But, you know, it was interesting, and I'll give credit to my colleague, Seth Maycomber. You know, he mentioned that the Revs, you know, they kind of have the similarities to Philly with kind of that youth development, you know, especially as of recently, you know, Esmir Bartarovic, you know, Peyton Miller linked to Tottenham, a lot of young players. So I do think that there could be the potential to fit there. But if he's looking to win, I don't necessarily know if that will be the same case, because whoever does get this job is going to have to inherit a roster that was primarily, you know, made up by Caleb Porter. You're going to have acquisitions, major acquisitions, you know, Dor Turgman, what you're going to do with Matt Turner. There's lots of kind of things that you have to inherit. And obviously, if I'm Jim Curtin, I've shown I've been able to develop young talent. I really want to go out and win an MLS Cup. And I mean, you know, this was a guy when, you know, Greg Berhalter was let go, people were wondering if he'd get the U.S. men's national team job. So I think it's going to take a lot to get Jim Curtin. I think if you're looking to continue that youth development, I think it would be a great fit. It's just a question of can you get him? I think, the Revolution, they would love to get Jim Curtin. It's, are you going to give them full control? Similar to Bruce Arena, head coach and sporting director. Are you going to, back up the bring chart in terms of the financials? So as much as I would love to see him here, I don't know if it will get over the finish line, if you will.
So, kind of tagging off of that question, I guess in your mind, who kind of makes sense for that role if Jim Curtin doesn't get it? What other coaches do you think that the Reds could turn to hopefully get this team back on track?
Yeah, I think definitely you look at who was kind of in the running when Bruce Arena ended up resigning. I think, Gio Savarese is one that really stands out to me. I think will probably be a contender for the role. It'd be interesting to see if maybe some assistant coaches, Don Kinnear was someone who got mentioned. I know it might be a little bit interesting for you guys to hear, but someone, kind of in our Discord, people are talking about was Rob Valentino, Troy Lassen. So it would be interesting to see maybe some of those guys who have some sort of experience. But I would say right now it's probably Jim Curtin or Gio Savarese, and there'll probably be someone who comes out of the woodwork. Will be interesting to see what Bob Bradley's up to. But I think the only real ones I can really peg, and definitely I would say are probably the favorites just based on what we've seen in the past. It's someone like Gio Savarese, and obviously with Tom Bogart reporting, Jim Curtin.
Yeah, and in that same Tom Bogart report, he did mention that the Revs had, I think, interviewed Savarese during their last interview process when Porter was eventually hired. So he could certainly be a candidate. He's still definitely a free agent. But I guess tying into this question of who your next manager might be, uh, what do you think is like the most important characteristic that they have to have? I think here in Atlanta, right? Last season we had that miracle run in the playoffs, beating Miami, and then that wasn't enough for Rob Valentino to keep his job. The dialogue was it has to be oh, we need MLS Cup winning experience, and that's why they brought Ronnie Dylan, and that hasn't really worked. He's keeping his job, having a worse season than Caleb Porter has had in 2025. What is that really important? Really, having an MLS Cup winning or an MLS experienced coach?
I think it is valuable to have someone who I would say just has MLS experience. I think when you look at how the Caleb Porter experience went, I don't necessarily know if it has to be someone with that real MLS prestige in terms of trophies and what have you. Obviously, I think someone like Savarese, someone like Curtin would be great. And I think you just need someone who has that inherent knowledge of the league. I think really what's important kind of coming off the heels of Caleb Porter and kind of seeing what you were able to do with Bruce Arena. I think you kind of need someone who is that man manager, can create a positive atmosphere in the locker room, can motivate players. So I think it's great to have someone with that MLS experience, kind of knows the difficulties of the league, but you don't necessarily need someone who was, has won a trophy. I mean, getting to the final of an MLS Cup, it takes a lot, and part of it can just be luck, circumstances, but obviously it does take some, great head coaching experience as well. I do think seeing how things went with Caleb Porter, it should shift to change the kind of view of how the Revolution should approach this. I think you saw that you had a proven MLS Cup winner. Maybe again, like I said, maybe the game has passed them by, but you tried that out. So I think going after someone like Curtin, Savarese, or maybe even looking elsewhere, I think you can't just go for maybe that MLS retread, someone who simply has MLS experience, and so why not just go with him? I think there has to be maybe a little more. There needs to be a little bit more in terms of looking maybe outside the box. But also too, like I said, MLS experience is valuable because this league is so unique. But you don't have to get that tried and true winner. Maybe someone can come to New England and really make it work, and where they haven't been able to elsewhere.
It's funny you say that because this is like the same conversation that we had when Gonzalo Pineda was fired last year, and then it was like, oh, who's the coach going to be? Like, what do we want an MLS retread? Do we want the same like 5 coaches that have been cycled through like every team in Major League Soccer at this point? But I mean, to your point, yeah, the experience in MLS, because it is a different league, is super valuable, but also I think the sample size is so big now that you kind of know what you're getting with a lot of these guys. And in some ways, man, it's almost like, man, let's go for the exotic hire. Let's go for the one that's never been here before. Let's get fresh ideas. Let's do like, again, from an Atlanta perspective, like a Tata Martino in 2017, never been in MLS, obviously, and came in, and his style changed a lot of things, and it was beneficial. Now, people can obviously crash and burn as well, but it's an interesting moment for Major League Soccer right now, because you've gone through the Bruce Arenas and the Caleb Porters of the world, and there's so much more emerging talent, across the pond, down south, wherever. And I think the next big team in Major League Soccer is going to be one of the ones that go after the coaches that nobody's really heard of here in Major League Soccer.
Yeah, and I think even I'll put Bruce Arena in there in the sense that that was a really big get for the Revs. I think Revolution fans were very much stunned by the acquisition. So maybe if for some reason we see the Revs just love former U.S. men's national team coaches, somehow Bob Bradley ends up in New England. I mean, I feel like Revolution fans would like kind of that go-getter mentality of getting someone like that. But I do think you've kind of seen some U.S. or some European assistant coaches come over and have some success. You mentioned Tata. I think you could go for someone like that, kind of go for someone maybe who's coached in South America or Europe and see what they're able to do in MLS. And I think, a lot of talk is about, oh, there's so many players coming here, you're able to attract more players. But I imagine if you have the opportunity to coach against the likes of Heung-min Son or Messi and what have you, that's a really interesting prospect that, you might not have had, a few years ago. So I would love for the Revs to really kind of go out there, not just go for the MLS retreads. Again, personally, Jim Curtin and Gio Savarese, I think would be great, but I'd love to see them kind of, out there, Revs linked to so-and-so head coach, whether it's over in Europe, over in England, Germany, or, obviously against South America. I think that there's a real opportunity for the Revs to build. A lot of talk, especially around here, is how soccer can kind of grow heading into and out of 2026. They've talked about the Revolution Stadium. And I think, if you're able to go out and get a head coach who can get this team performing well, heading into the World Cup and kind of, heading out of the World Cup, that could do great things. And obviously, if the Revs are able to get out of Gillette and kind of get their own home closer to the city, that would be even better. So I would really like to see the Revs go out there. Will they? That's another question. But interesting times here in New England, especially for a lot of people. It seemed like Caleb Porter was going to get the job for the rest of the year, and then that would be the moment. But this news definitely was a little bit of a shock.